The Whispering Dark Chapter 1. The house on Ashfield Road. For as long as the town of Windley could remember, Ashfield Road had been a place to avoid. Most of the residents spoke of it in hushed tones, a place where no one dared linger after dusk. The house at the end of the street, on the farthest corner, was the worst of all. Locals called it the Ashfield House, though it had been years since anyone had set foot inside. It wasn't always this way. Once, Ashfield House had been a grand estate, a home for the esteemed Bennet family, wealthy merchants who ruled over Windley for decades. But something happened that no one in town dared speak of, not even the oldest of the residents. A night. A horrible night. The youngest Bennet, a girl named Eliza, had gone missing. Some said she simply ran away, but no one believed that. The very same night, strange sounds were heard emanating from the house, loud, guttural whispers, like voices calling from deep underground. The next morning, the house was locked, and the family vanished without a trace. No one ever heard from them again, and the house, once full of light and laughter, became an empty shell, overrun by shadows. For decades, Ashfield House stood untouched. The windows cracked, the wooden frame slowly rotted, vines crawling up its sides, like fingers reaching out. It was as if time had abandoned it, leaving the place to decay. Then came Sarah. Sarah Holbrook was a writer, drawn to small towns for the stories they held. She had heard the rumors about Ashfield House, and like any seasoned journalist, her curiosity had been piqued. She couldn't resist. There was a story there, she could feel it in her bones. The first time Sarah drove down Ashfield Road, she noticed the house looming at the end, its windows dark and forbidding. A chill crept up her spine, but she pushed the sensation away. It's just an old house, she told herself. There's no such thing as ghosts. She parked her car at the side of the road and walked toward the iron gate, which creaked open on its own, as if inviting her inside. The air around the house felt thick, oppressive. The faint smell of decay lingered, mixed with the scent of old wood and damp earth. The door, which had once been a majestic entryway, now hung ajar, its frame warped with age. Sarah stepped over the threshold, the door squeaking closed behind her. Dust filled the air, drifting in lazy swirls like forgotten memories. Her footsteps echoed in the silence as she explored the ground floor, her flashlight beam revealing a once beautiful foyer, now covered in cobwebs and peeling wallpaper. In the far corner, a grand staircase spiraled upwards, leading to darkness. Despite herself, Sarah felt drawn to it. Her hand gripped the banister, cold and slick under her fingers. She began to climb the stairs, each step groaning beneath her weight, as if the house itself was alive, watching her every move. At the top, the hallway stretched out in both directions. Sarah's heart began to pound in her chest. There were doors on either side, some closed, some slightly ajar. She walked toward the first one, the door creaking open with little effort. Inside, she found what she had hoped for, old, dusty furniture, relics of a time long past. But it was the painting on the wall that caught her eye. It was a portrait of Eliza Bennet, the missing girl. Her face was beautiful, but haunting, a slight smile playing on her lips. Sarah shuddered as she stared at it. There was something unnerving about the way the girl's eyes seemed to follow her, no matter where she moved. The air grew colder. The whispers started faintly, like the rustling of dry leaves, but as Sarah listened more closely, they grew clearer, more distinct. Words. Muffled, urgent, frantic. She couldn't make out the language, but it sounded like pleading. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from upstairs. Sarah spun around, her heart racing. The whispers stopped. Silence. With trembling hands, Sarah crept toward the stairs that led up to the attic. The wood was slick with moisture, and the further she climbed, the colder it became. The whispers began again, louder this time, as if they were right behind her. Leave, leave, leave. She reached the attic door, which was slightly ajar, and pushed it open with a force that made it groan. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the room was dim, save for the small slivers of moonlight piercing through the cracked windows. At the far end of the attic stood a large chest, its surface old and scarred, as if it had been moved many times. The whispers were louder now, almost deafening. They came from within the chest. Sarah stepped closer, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her mind screamed at her to turn back, to leave, but her curiosity pushed her forward. She reached out and touched the cold wood of the chest. A jolt of energy shot through her, making her flinch. The whispers turned into a sharp, agonized scream that seemed to tear at her very soul. She stumbled back, but before she could react, the chest flew open on its own, and something dark and cold reached out and grabbed her wrist. It wasn't human. The room went black. When Sarah awoke, the house was silent again. The whispers had ceased. But when she opened her eyes, she realized she wasn't alone. Standing in the corner, bathed in the pale moonlight, was Eliza Bennet, her face now twisted with anguish. "Why did you come here?" Eliza's voice was a whisper, but it was no longer soft. It was commanding, sharp, desperate. "You should have left. You should have listened." Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the air grew even colder, her heart hammering in her chest. Eliza stepped forward, her expression twisted in a mix of sorrow and malice. "Now, you're one of us." And as Sarah screamed, the darkness swallowed her whole. The whispers began again, softer now, echoing through the walls, calling to the next soul brave, or foolish, enough to enter Ashfield House. Thank you for following the story. If you find it interesting, please give me a like and a subscribe. Thank you.